My name is Brian Porter. I've been on for 28 years with the City of Toronto, and prior to that, the City of York. I'm currently a captain. I'm assigned to this truck right here, which is Squad 313 on D Platoon. Okay, so to answer that question, I'll start by talking about how I came to this job. So I grew up in Scarborough, and as a young person, I worked in the City of Scarborough in the aquatics department. I was a lifeguard, swimming instructor, later on went to teaching other lifeguards. And through that experience, I came into contact with a lot of people who were thinking about emergency services or emergency response careers, and firefighters in particular. I came into contact with a lot of people that were thinking about going down that path. So that was sort of my first contact. You know, it's ironic because at the time in the 90s and even the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, in Scarborough, Scarborough being really multicultural, there wasn't a lot of black folk in the pools as lifeguards or teaching other people how to swim or whatever. So that, in fact, I was around some people. My sister met her husband through the aquatics division in the City of Scarborough, and he's now a Toronto firefighter, or he was. So that's how I got into the contact. So off I went to university. I had other career options, you know, through the university degrees that I took, but I always had firefighting in the back of my mind. So I started making applications and got hired by the City of York Fire Department in 1995. If you know anything about the City of York, it's extremely multicultural. As a community, Little Jamaica along Eglinton Avenue West stretch is part of the City of York. Although at the time there were not, you know, I was one of very, very few black firefighters within the City of York context at the time. So I did the first 19 years of my career working in the City of York, right along that Eglinton Avenue stretch. Spent a lot of time introducing my crews to Jamaican patties and jerk chicken at all the restaurants up on Eglinton. But all the while, you know, it was a regular thing to have people approach me, kids, adults, you know, they'd see me out at a call, they'd see me at a public event, just on the truck, stopping in at a restaurant, saying things like, I didn't know black people could be firefighters, right? Talked to a lot of kids. So I was kind of always aware of my presence, and I was mindful of my presence in that environment as one of the few black people or minority of any kind working within the fire department at that time. So on the racism front, I'm not going to say that it never happened or I'd never experienced racism during those 19 years or even, you know, throughout the course of my entire career. I would say that it probably happens less frequently in 2023 than it did in 1995 when I started and in those early years. But I was able to deal with it. Overall, my experience has been a good one. It was a career that I was well considered, like I mentioned, how I came to it and how I got into it. I have no regrets about choosing this as a career. But like I said, I've always been mindful of my presence as one of the very few black people or minority of any kind within the fire service context. And it's interesting that the fire service itself was made up of a lot of different types of people, but you know, from all parts of Europe, but just not a lot of minorities, right? So there was lots of Italian people and Greek people and people from the British Isles and, you know, other parts of Europe, Eastern Europeans. Somehow in the City of York we had a number of people from, you know, the former Soviet Union or Eastern Europe. So there was an element of a melting pot, but it just didn't include certain types of folks at the time. So. Okay, so as I had mentioned just before, I was always really mindful of my presence as one of the very few minority firefighters within the context of where I started with the City of York, and then once we amalgamated, the 6 former cities and boroughs became one. Nothing really changed in terms of, you know, there was more people, so there was more minorities and more black people, but we were still a fairly small number within the greater context. So being mindful of that, an opportunity came up to come off the trucks and join the recruitment division as a recruitment and outreach officer. I think it was in 2001, somewhere around there. So I made the choice to do that. Part of my reasoning for that was because I was aware that there wasn't a lot of diversity in the fire service, and that was an opportunity for me to actually be actively involved in maybe having a positive influence on that. So that was a 1-year-long secondment. It was an interesting experience. I learned some of the reasons why, some of the challenges within certain communities with respect to why this may not be seen as a career for certain people. And so our mission really was to get out there and educate people and let them know that the fire service in the Canadian context may be very, very different from some other parts of the world, which is some of the challenges with certain cultures and people from certain parts of the world not even seeing it as something they would even be inspired to do. So within that role, one of the things, outreach, I realized that at the time that outreach into the community and education was a huge part of it. One of the things that I did, and this is probably my favorite takeaway from that entire year in the recruitment and outreach division, was a weekly basketball game that I got hooked up on through a Toronto police recruiter. It actually took place just down the road here in St. Jamestown. And I went to this event weekly, 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock, I believe it was Wednesday nights, and played basketball with people from the community. They didn't know I was a firefighter. All I did was wear a Toronto Fire t-shirt. And I did this for about 4 or 5 months, every week. And it was part of my job, the outreach part. And so after about the 4th or 5th week, some of the regulars would ask me, dude, what's up with that Toronto Fire t-shirt that you wear every week? I'm a Toronto firefighter. And so that opened up the door and started the conversation to where 2 people that I met at that basketball game, one of them was a young man in his early 20s and another was 16 years old in high school at the time, have gone on to careers in the fire service from that initial contact through a basketball game. So little things like that. They had no idea at the time what the requirements were. They were literally starting from zero in terms of having any of the qualifications that are required, were required at the time to come into this job. And sort of came, mentors to them, and I'm still in contact with both of them. Neither one of them was hired with the City of Toronto, unfortunately for us. They were in other surrounding cities, but they both are now in what I would consider successful careers as firefighters. So I learned at that time that some little things like that can make a difference, and so those lessons stay with me today, and I'm still trying to do things like that within the context of my role currently. So as I near the end of my career, I probably only have just a few years left before I retire and walk away into the sunset. Obviously, I'd like to see the job is committed to, say they're committed to increasing the diversity of the fire department, of Toronto Fire Services. I believe them when they express that commitment. So going forward, I hope to see, obviously, I believe in the mantra or the idea that a more diverse fire service is a stronger fire service. We are a better team when we're made up of a more diverse group of people. Nowhere is that more relevant than in the City of Toronto, which is, often cited as the most diverse city in the world. So I see things happening today that give me some optimism, and I just hope that we as an organization build on those things going forward to where that we can actually, we're not in that position now, we're not even close to it, but hopefully, I don't know if I'll see it in the remaining years that I have left, but we'll certainly stay engaged even after I'm retired, and the ultimate goal is for us to achieve the goal of becoming a more diverse, more representative fire service for the people of Toronto. That's what I hope to see. So.